Hello, thank you for joining us on World Konnect, the show that brings you up to speed with fascinating developments around the world, whether in geopolitics, films, music, art, culture and more. We'll be looking at diverse news stories from nearly all parts of the world. This show is different because it doesn't focus on the domestic at all, but is a window to the world, a global picture of our times. First, the focus of the show. Xi Jinping's visit to UK, where the British media is talking about ushering in a golden era in UK-Chinese ties. Canada's youthful new Prime Minister, who has promised change with the Liberals back at the helm. The painful impact of the ravages of war on children caught in the crossfire. Another story that begs the question, why? And what lies between hurricanes and droughts? Mexico seeing unusual times. Chinese President Xi Jinping was on a state visit to the UK, and while he did talk about his favourite sport, football, and even met players at Manchester City, there was some serious business discussed, with deals worth $62 billion signed.
We're signing an historic deal to build the Hinkley nuclear power station, providing reliable, affordable energy for nearly 6 million homes and creating more than 25,000 jobs.
China and the United Kingdom took their bilateral relationship to an all-new high with the signing of a landmark nuclear deal. The $9 billion nuclear deal was struck during Chinese President Xi Jinping's maiden visit to the UK. The deal, the largest inward investment ever in the United Kingdom, will see China's General Nuclear Corporation take a one-third stake in the Hinkley Point nuclear plant in Somerset.
I had a productive meeting with Prime Minister Cameron. We will build a global comprehensive strategic partnership between our countries in the 21st century and jointly open up a golden era of an enduring, inclusive and mutually beneficial China-UK relationship.
The visit by the Chinese president comes amid increasing evidence that China's economy, the world's second largest, is slowing down. Other than the Hinkley project, the two countries will jointly develop 2 other nuclear power stations. Trade deals totaling $62 billion have been signed in sectors including automobiles, shipping and healthcare. China and Britain also pledged not to conduct cyber espionage. The People's Bank of China also launched a yuan-denominated bond in London for the first time as it seeks to internationalize its currency. On Britain's concerns over layoffs in the steel sector, Jinping said China's own steel and iron industry is facing overcapacity. Jinping touched upon the human rights issues back home, saying there is always room for improvement around the world, not just in China. The comments, however, have not gone down well with pro-Tibetan protesters. During his 4-day visit, the Chinese president also addressed the British Parliament. Jinping's visit was high on pomp and pageantry. The Chinese president got a royal welcome with a 41-gun salute and rode to Buckingham Palace in a gilded carriage with Queen Elizabeth.
Two Chinese diplomats were killed and a third wounded in a shooting at a restaurant in Cebu City in the Philippines. Police took a woman who works at the consulate and her husband into custody. The suspects have diplomatic immunity and will be sent back to China. China has said it is investigating the shooting. Typhoon Kopu left behind a trail of devastation in the Philippines. Over 50 people have been killed as heavy rains triggered flooding and landslides. It's a typhoon that has affected more than 100,000 people. Kopu is the second strongest typhoon to hit the disaster-weary country this year. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was heckled by a protester during his speech in the United States demanding freedom for Balochistan. And Sharif was speaking at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, a prominent independent think tank. The protester raised slogans including Free Balochistan, Stop War Crimes in Balochistan, besides calling him a friend of Osama bin Laden. There have been many media reports on Pakistan's atrocities in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
Stop the war crimes in Balochistan! Stop the war crimes in Balochistan!
Anyone who defames, insults or threatens the king, the queen, the heir apparent or the regent will be punished with up to 15 years in prison. Well, that's the law in Thailand, and it's in focus once again.
Thailand's draconian royal defamation law is in limelight again. A Bangkok military court has charged and jailed 3 persons for defaming the royals. Country's lèse-majesté provisions that protect royal family from any insult or defamation and are among the harshest in the world and have landed many into jails, that too dramatically long jail terms. The monarch is central to Thai society. King Bhumibol Adulyadej is widely loved and often treated as a virtual god. Law protecting royal family says, anyone who defames, insults or threatens the king, the queen, the heir apparent or the regent will be punished with up to 15 years in prison. Thai courts have pronounced record verdicts under the law. In August this year, 2 suspects were awarded 30 years and 28 years of jail term for allegedly defaming the monarchs on Facebook. In March this year, a man was jailed for 25 years for posting pictures on Facebook page on similar charges. In August last year, a Thai musician was sentenced to 15 years in prison for royal defamation. A former member of the Thai royal family, Sirasamy Swathi, had to relinquish her royal title following a growing corruption controversy. Sirasamy's relatives were accused of using the name of the royal family. But Thailand is not the only country which has such stringent laws. If someone dares to defame the head of the state in Kuwait, he or she be better prepared to be exiled permanently. In Bahrain, similar charges can land an offender in jail for a maximum term of 7 years. Poland has a provision of up to 3 years in prison. It's up to 4 years in Turkey, while in Netherlands, a guilty may be sentenced to a maximum of 5 years jail. In Iran, insulting head of the state or leaders will lead to imprisonment of 3 to 6 months, 74 lashes or a fine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of double standards over Syria. Putin's comments come ahead of his foreign ministers meeting counterparts of the United States, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Russia has favored talks between the Syrian government and the full spectrum of opposition. The foreign ministers met to discuss the Syria crisis, which has had widespread bloodshed, claiming over 250,000 lives. Speaking at a political conference in Sochi, Putin said the West is using some of the rebel groups as pawns to fit their wider agenda in the Middle East. Earlier this week, the Syrian President Assad traveled to Moscow to thank Putin for launching airstrikes last month. The 2 leaders agreed that military operations might be followed by political steps. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Germany. French President François Hollande had some words of advice for Turkey and Greece. Here's more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry sought to calm down the tension between Israel and Palestine during a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu in Germany. Kerry said talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave him a cautious measure of optimism that tensions could be diffused. The recent spate of violence in Jerusalem, Gaza, West Bank and other areas claimed the lives of 9 Israelis and over 45 Palestinians. More than 40 elders were killed in a road mishap in the French town of Libon, near Bordeaux. The crash happened when a bus collided with a truck head-on. The bus carrying elderly from a nearby village was going on an excursion. French President François Hollande expressed his sadness and promised a thorough probe. Germany has announced the introduction of measures to tackle its refugee crisis earlier than previously expected. It will now accelerate deportation procedures to begin as early as next week. The country expects a record influx of more than 800,000 migrants this year. Meanwhile, Croatia and Serbia agreed to discuss measures to speed up the flow of migrants streaming across the Balkans. They agreed to organize a direct train line for the migrants from the Serbian city of Sid to the Croatian city of Slavonski Brod. Meanwhile, French President François Hollande said Europe should offer Turkey financial assistance, but Turkey should also allow migrants to work. French President François Hollande has backed a Greek request to start negotiations with bailout lenders by the end of this year. During a visit to Greece, Hollande said talks should start after bailout inspectors complete the review of Greece's reforms progress, which is expected to start next month and last several weeks. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said his country would meet its obligations under the Euro bailout deal. He added any talk of a Eurozone split or of Athens abandoning the single currency needed to end.
And before shifting our focus to the Americas, let's take a round of Trolls Festival in Denmark, which attracted participants from near and afar. A troll is a supernatural being in Norse mythology as well as Scandinavian folklore. Soon after poll results, Justin Trudeau spoke serious business and announced the removal of fighter jets from Afghanistan as well as from Syrian airspace. He will become the second youngest Prime Minister in Canadian history after Joe Clark, who had unseated Trudeau's father for a year in 1979.
Sunny ways, my friends. Sunny ways. This is what positive politics can do. This is what a positive, hopeful vision and platform and team can make happen.
Canadian Liberal leader Justin Trudeau thanking supporters as he moved back to official Prime Ministerial residence where he lived for almost 12 years when his father was in office. Trudeau stormed to power after a resounding victory for his party, which was in shambles after winning third place in 2011 polls.
Bonjour, votre sainteté.
43-year-old Justin Trudeau inherited politics from his father Pierre Trudeau, who dominated Canadian politics in the 70s and was Prime Minister for more than 15 years. Justin Trudeau campaigned on a theme of change and presented his new vision for Canada, striking the right chord with voters. He was often brushed off by his opponents as being more style than substance and an intellectual lightweight, not ready for the job. But a bold pledge to run a budget deficit and boost spending to spur the economy helped the Liberals engineer a turnaround. The major challenges that await the youthful Liberal leader are improving the country's environmental image, revisit Harper's anti-terrorism law, and improve ties with the US. Soon after winning polls, the Liberal announced to withdraw jets from Afghanistan and Syria. The sweeping Liberal victory marks a significant shift in Canadian politics, a major setback for Conservatives who have been in power for almost a decade. Since 2006, Canadian politics spectrum has shifted towards right, resulting in Stephen Harper emerging as the most powerful Conservative politician. But some of Harper's controversial decisions of late created deep dent in his popularity, which ultimately resulted in Conservative poll debacle. Trudeau's landslide win caught many by surprise. As soon as the youthful leader won the elections, the global focus for a moment shifted on his charismatic persona. As Justin Trudeau takes forward his father's political legacy, he faces an uphill task of delivering the swath of election promises.
Hurricane Patricia, the strongest on record, made landfall at Jalisco state in western Mexico, bringing destructive winds and rain. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said the hurricane hit as a Category 5 storm, the highest classification, but later weakened to a lower category storm. Authorities said the storm was potentially catastrophic, but major damage appeared to have been avoided. The Mexican authorities had evacuated thousands of residents along the country's Pacific coast before the hurricane hit. Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton testified before a congressional panel investigating the 2012 attack on a U.S. diplomatic mission in the Libyan city Benghazi. In her testimony, Clinton managed to accuse her rivals of exploiting the deadly attacks in Libya, which came under her watch as Secretary of State for political gain.
My challenge to you, members of this committee, is the same challenge I put to myself. Let's be worthy of the trust the American people have bestowed upon us. They expect us to lead, to learn the right lessons, to rise above partisanship, and to reach for statesmanship. That's what I try to do every day as Secretary of State, and it's what I hope we will all strive for here today and into the future.
US President Barack Obama met the Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif at the White House on Thursday. Both leaders stressed on the importance of strengthening US-Pakistani ties. Washington has categorically ruled out any kind of negotiations with Pakistan on a civil nuclear deal.
Helping to build this country. Thank you.
The United Nations is celebrating its 70th anniversary, with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon saying the United Nations remains a beacon for all humanity. The Global Forum came into existence on the 24th of October 1945 when a resolution was adopted in San Francisco. Ban Ki-moon said there is only one flag that belongs to everyone, the blue flag of the United Nations. To mark the occasion, more than 300 monuments and buildings in more than 75 countries are being illuminated in UN blue, from Australia to Azerbaijan, Indonesia to Iraq, Saudi Arabia to South Sudan. And before moving to Africa to see what's happening across the continent, let's get a glimpse of a clown festival that took place in Mexico. Hundreds of clowns across the Americas marched merrily through the city to mark the 20th Annual International Clown Convention. Egypt voted last week in the first phase of what promised a parliament with powers to even impeach the president. But with hardly any voters, did the election provide a fig leaf for an authoritarian democracy?
Imagine an election where there are no voters. While Egypt witnessed an almost no-voter situation last week in the first phase of parliamentary polls. A meager 26.5% voting was registered in the first phase of the long-awaited parliamentary election held in half of the country's provinces. It was a steep drop from the 62% in the first stage of the last polls in 2011. Young voters were virtually absent from the scenario. Even President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's all-out appeal couldn't boost voters. With possibilities of Sisi's loyalists making it to the parliament, many appear to have shunned the ballot box.
After two revolutions, what did the revolution produce? It produced the worst of people. Those who reached parliament the previous time were bad people. We replaced the National Democratic Party with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are both bad. So of course, there is an atmosphere of disappointment.
Egypt has had no parliament since mid-2012, when a constitutional court ordered dissolution of the House. Muslim Brotherhood was dominating the House back then after coming to power post-2011 uprising toppling Hosni Mubarak. The current election claims to elect a powerful parliament with authority of rejecting the president's choice for prime minister or even impeach him. But with the Muslim Brotherhood leaders and youth activists behind bars, critics doubt its credibility. The second round of voting will take place on 22nd and 23rd November. The dismal poll percentage highlighted the growing disillusionment since the army seized power in 2013. With people least impressed with the army's promise to restore democracy, it seems their wait for a full-fledged and a fair one is not going to end sometime sooner.
South African President Jacob Zuma ruled out fee increases for universities next year. This followed a week of nationwide protests by students against any fee hike. Universities had proposed fee hikes of up to 11.5% next year, arguing that they need higher fees to keep up standards. Protests were carried out in Congo as the opposition called for a peaceful uprising ahead of Sunday's referendum. The referendum will decide whether the president can run for office again or not. The call comes after violent clashes between police and protesters, in which a few people died. President Denis Sassou Nguesso has been in power since 1997. The impact of the brutalities of war on the most vulnerable are often dismissed by the parties involved as unfortunate damage. But then, what about children caught in the crossfire?
"Don't bury me," he pleaded. Days later, he was. Fareed Shauki was just 6.
The young boy's dying plea brings Yemen's forgotten war back into focus. Farid Shauki was playing with other kids when a bomb fell on his house. The shrapnel pierced his body. Rushed to hospital, he pleaded in pain not to be buried. Tears streaming down his face. He was aware of the bitter realities of the conflict. The 6-year-old's fear is not just his. It is the fear felt by millions in a country battered by the shelling and siege of militias and the airstrikes of the Saudi-led coalition. Civilians are bearing the brunt of the violence. Over 2,000 civilians have been killed, of which nearly 500 are children. 1.4 million people are internally displaced, and 80% of the population is in immediate need of humanitarian assistance, including food, water, shelter, fuel and sanitation. The video of Farid's dying plea has gone viral on social media. For many, the story is painfully reminiscent of Aylan Kurdi, the Syrian toddler whose death drew the attention of the world to the migrant crisis. People are calling for an end to the bloodshed, but it's only unfortunate that the world waits to see their pain and then reacts.
Not all is sad though. Here's a story of someone who really cares dearly for children.
Books are a child's best friend, and for Ridwan Sururi, a 42-year-old man, making it accessible to young children is a priority. Ridwan spends 3 days a week leading Luna, his horse, around villages in central Java province with a small stack of children's books. In this area, located on the foot of Indonesia's active stratovolcano Mount Slamet, where there is limited access to reading material, Ridwan's horse library is what comes to the rescue.
The purpose of this library is to encourage reading. The reason why I use the horse is because, in my opinion, the horse is what attracts children.
The books, nearly 1,000, all of which have been given to him by friends or donors, are lent to the children for free. With the library coming to them, there has been a steady rise in interest among the kids too.
There is absolutely no charge for this. I borrow the books for free. Now I hope the book collection will grow and the children in this village will read more and be clever.
Education is not a concern for Indonesia, where literacy rates are high. But what is worrying is the shift in interest.
So I don't think there's a problem there for Indonesia. I think the government has really had a lot of success in literacy. Engaging students to think about the text, to engage with the text, that's where there are challenges.
Ridwan and Luna's mobile library has not just added a little flair to reading, but is also touching young lives and bringing about a positive change.
Bob Kane, the man who created Batman, received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The honor came just a day ahead of his 100th birth anniversary. Kane was born on the 24th of October 1915 in New York. Adele is back to singing, and Angelina Jolie
back in the news.
Well, that's what they're best known for.
Angelina Jolie's film Unbroken is finally set for release in Japan. Activists had launched an online campaign against the film. The war drama about an American prisoner, released in the US and other countries in 2014, will be shown in Tokyo next February. British singer Adele made her much-anticipated return with Hello, her first single in more than 3 years. The album titled 25 is set for release on 20th November. The 20th annual Tokyo International Film Festival kicked off on Thursday with the who's who of the film world walking down the red carpet. A total of 205 films will be shown at the festival, with 31 movies premiering worldwide.
Tokyo International Film Festival.
The film festival will run till 31st of October. The Rolling Stones singer Keith Richards performed at a jazz charity event in New York. The performance was to honor former Stones backup singer Mary Clayton, who is recovering from a car accident that cost her both legs.
A church emerging from the water? For some, that might be a miracle. But this fascinating apparition took place because of a lack of rain. But for the devout, it was a holy experience.
It's not every time that a rainfall deficit leaves one amused, but this one will for sure. A drought in Mexico's southern state of Chiapas uncovered a major surprise: the ruins of a 16th century church from the waters of a reservoir. The building is known as the Apostles' Temple of Santiago and the Temple of Quichula. It is believed to have been built by Spanish colonists in 1564 and was long lost to the waters of the reservoir in the area since 1966. The ancient church, located in the Grijalva River area, appeared once in 2002 as well, due to low water levels. This year, the water dropped to about 24 meters, revealing the spectacular view of the 400-year-old roofless church. The Zoques population organized a pilgrimage to the church and brought the statues of the patron saint, Apostle Santiago, and the Virgin of Guadalupe. The forgotten area is now abuzz with activities again, as curious visitors have started flocking to get a glimpse.
Ukraine's traditional dress fans were given a special treat during this year's Fashion Week in Kiev. Vintage folk costumes, some over 100 years old, were presented during one of the shows. The display was a part of the cultural project called Vatstoki, The Roots, aimed at showing the public traditional Ukrainian clothes. And that brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do send us your feedback. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldconnect@gdnews@gmail.com. And before we wrap up, let's leave you with the images of a tearful, emotionally fraught reunion when South Koreans, mostly elderly, met their family members in North Korea. The reunion came 60 years after they were separated by the Korean War. Take a look. Goodbye.